Essentially, every session we do a researcher and a practitioner on a theme that's relevant to design and sustainability. And we have covered many topics so far, from food to mobility to multi-species sustainability. And if you have not been, like, if this is your first time here, you can, if you're interested, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can get informed about upcoming talks. So we run these talks 4 times a year. The next one is going to be in May. And it's really nice that there's always new faces in these talks, and also new faces. And so this month, we are talking about biochar in the city. We're going to put on table biochar in the city as, you know, its viability as a carbon sink. And here I have a colleague, dear colleague, Professor Mikko Jalas, who has a PhD in organization and management, and he's actually sharing a professorship between School and School of Art Design and Architecture. And we also have Susanna Kankaanpää. She's joining from city of Helsinki, and she's a climate expert in the urban environment region. How we run these talks is we have a very specific format. So each speaker has around 20 minutes of presentation time. We don't take questions in between, but after that we do have a panel. So please keep your questions for that time. I also have a sample of biochar to circulate around. Probably don't put your fingers in the bag unless you want really black stains. Sorry for the ugly IKEA bag, but we also have a more honored version of the material here. But without further ado, I would like to invite Lisa to the stage, and I'm going to put down, and the stage is yours, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. And the mic is
mic is over here. Picture is being over here.
okay.
In this area.
All right. So thanks for the invitation and for the initiative. So NODUS Talks is a format that pushes people who may like to stay in the university or do their research or develop their solutions, you know, maybe not so much in the public. So this is an event.
Oh, okay. Right. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
all good.
So I'm taking this opportunity to come and speak in public for an issue or about an issue that I think is very important. And there are in the room several colleagues who have been working with me. So currently, Tuuli Markkanen, important for all the work that we are developing together with City of Helsinki, and Susanna, and then aalto-yliopisto, who is no longer in the project but has been working. So a lot of teamwork. And one of the forms of teamwork was that I'm going to split the title so that I could speak about biochar and Susanna could be talking about in the city. Let's see how it works. I'm gonna, of course, touch the city context. I will give some basic facts or reasons why to be interested in biochar. I will put it into an international context of what the IPCC, for example, is thinking about biochar, and then also what role it could play in Finnish climate policy and climate action. And that's going to be a way to then towards Helsinki. But firstly, so biochar, if you wonder what it is, a typical way to say it, that it's wood that hasn't been burnt all the way. So it's the kind of material that you get out of organic material when you heat it up, but there isn't enough oxygen for it to burn completely. So it's going to look something like charcoal and so on and so forth. But biochar actually is produced in quite controlled processes in order to reach certain important characters. And one of the important It's not moving forward. Oh. Okay, so one of the important characters looks like this. So if you have been in a forest, you will notice that old remains of forest fires can stay for a very, very long time. Very similarly, if you think of traditional ways of building wooden fences, so you would burn the part of the wood that is touching the ground, because wood, when it's carbonized in this way, does not rot very easily. And the reason is something like this, that you get aromatic forms of carbon when you heat it up, and that's going to resist the normal processes of rotting. So very important here now for climate action purposes as well is that biochar is stable enough. It's not going to rot even if you put it into ground that is wet or where wood normally would decompose. This is not going to do that. It's going to be permanent enough for at least some hundreds of years, and that's quite a long time in our climate action scope. Then the other important character is that when you look close, it looks something like this. So it's very porous material, and this is what now starts to interest those who are working with green infrastructures, parks, planting trees, and so on and so forth. So it has these capacities of both holding water and then providing a substrate for microbe growth. So there's quite solid, even if it's varying, quite solid evidence that it supports plant growth and soil productivity, which then could yield another benefit in terms of climate change mitigation. So not only are you creating a direct carbon sink by putting biochar into the soil, but you may, in right conditions, improve the plant growth and of course then the carbon intake. Now, so this is kind of my interpretation of the situation, and I'm not a gardener. I'm more thinking about climate change mitigation. So I've claimed that for several centuries we have excelled in mobilizing fossil fuel reserves and converting them to atmospheric CO2. This is what we have been very good, and the scale has been massive for a couple hundreds of years, and this is why we have excess carbon in the atmosphere. So the current state of climate emergency and the need for deep-reaching societal and metabolic transformations calls for reversal of this logic. So I think that we need large-scale, effective, maybe even profitable ways of drawing down carbon from the atmosphere. And this is what we are kind of building here. Of course, now the city is a kind of very important scheme for here. And I'm very happy what is kind of happening with the city of Helsinki of very significant and raising interest in biochar. Now, if you think about the kind of global situation, again, this is like a graphical representation of the previous slide. So we have a gray history of emitting a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. We have a brown future, that is emissions that are going to continue for quite some time. We'll see how it plays out, but what is clear is that we need a lot of the green area, which is now called negative emissions. So that could be something where it's like human activity that leads to increasing drawdown of carbon through different means. And right now we are kind of still in the phase of cutting the emissions is kind of key. We will be somewhere in the future where we start to talk about carbon neutrality. But the longer term future is where we need to be running carbon negative processes. So where we are here, where the green is much more important in terms of volume, and we are kind of repairing the damage that we have done previously. Now, how does this fit into the Finnish national scheme? Sorry for that the slide is in Finnish, but this is kind of the, you know, the brown color of the previous figure, our emissions, and this is our negative emissions. And at the moment, forests and forest soil play the most important role. They are the last ones here. And this is the so-called wood products. That's biomass that has been harvested that we store somewhere. Biochar is going to play an important role in here. extending that part. Also, something that is called carbon capture and storage is going to play an important role. Unfortunately, Finland is quite late in here. It might be that I don't know all the developments, but Norway and Sweden are getting plants in operation in terms of our climate carbon capture and storage. Finland, I don't know any cases. I think our road will be more on biochar. At least it's quicker to ramp up. Well, that's just IPCC listing different ways of drawing down carbon. So just to let you know, of course, that there's a range of possibilities. Biochar and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage sits here in the middle, and of course it's very relevant for those countries that have a lot of biomass, forest biomass or agricultural biomass to be used for these purposes. So again, IPCC stating that biochar is has significant mitigation potential through CDR, so that's carbon dioxide removal technologies and emission reduction, and can improve soil properties and so on and so forth. So there's kind of like not pending, but quite solid understanding of the scientific community that this is part of the solution. And also that biochar systems producing biochar for soil application plus bioenergy generally give greater mitigation than bioenergy alone. So I think that the future in Finland will be that we will be producing biochar in those plants that are currently operating with wood chips for heat production or in the district heating system. So that's a kind of quite a logical follow-up from here. This is what is happening commercially. So there's quite a bit of companies that are putting effort in here. Capacity is ramping up in Finland, in Europe. There are scenarios where you can use the residual forest wood in pyrolysis, get power and biochar, gas and biochar, and even hydrogen, heat and biochar out of this system. So this material is being kind of connected to a lot of the promises also of the kind of energy transition or climate mitigation transition in general. And indeed, there's a lot of commercial interest in here. And now the users, like the city of Helsinki, are in a very good position in also trying to facilitate the market development and learn the practices of using biochar. I have, I think, a couple of slides still. Problems ahead, for sure. I think this looks like something where, or let's say that carbon drawdown would be very nice if it happens in the forest, through the protection of wetlands and so on and so forth. Then we have biodiversity and climate change mitigation pointing at the same direction. But this is also a system that is starting to look very kind of biomass hungry industry, where forests are being treated as resources for biomass production. So there is obviously all the dangers that lie within bio-based systems relate to this as well. So it's a question that what do we use as a feedstock? Currently we are using waste materials, but if you want to ramp this option up, then you are going to be creating competing uses for forest biomass and some obstacles for kind of running the parallel track of biodiversity protection and climate change mitigation. Then towards Helsinki. Oona and Arto and me were working last spring to give some rough ideas of how much and what kind of waste materials would there be in Helsinki to produce biochar. Now, not production material technologies are not really there yet for all these materials, but we are just signaling the volume of different materials. So wastewater sludge is already something that HSY is working, making char out of that. Municipal bio-waste, both separate collection and the mixed waste is there. as organic waste stream potentially to be used. Waste wood, something that comes through demolition, construction activities, and so on and so forth, could contribute to biochar production, and green waste as well. So we have been running tests now with, for example, seaweed, grass cutting, and so on and so forth. Again, technologies are not really there yet. We are better using wood chips than the other streams, but this is a relevant scheme for the city administration because it's tackling both waste management issues and then climate change mitigation. Finally, where are we thinking that might be put? So again, work by Oona, thinking of using it in pre-existing soils, new soils with new green infrastructures, for example, water filters, and then also something what we call special and temporary use. So even deposits. So if we want to draw down carbon, we might just do that for the sake of that and think about uses later. Construction material, insulation material, all these kind of uses are only developing. And this is where we leave basically the situation that we have run workshops with citizens and with the city civil servants, with students, with NGOs, and so on and so forth, thinking of how to do carbon drawdown in urban green areas, and biochar is one kind of option that comes out of those processes. And I believe I would leave the floor now to Susanna. It's kind of like this is where it may be this meeting where we met first time. So this is, now you'll hear what happened after that, and of course much more from the Helsinki context. Siinä olisi jo muutama, joo.
Yeah, I was just, I live in Tampere, work in Helsinki, but live in Tampere for a year and a half. And this morning on the train, somebody, I just overheard a conversation, and this guy was saying to his friend that I went to a seminar, and every time, there was the speech ended and, the applause, everybody had to stand up like in school, when answering. And so the speeches were 15 minutes, and every 15 minutes, everybody stood up and then they clapped. And he thought that was wonderful because he was going to a seminar that lasted for 8 hours, and he was exhausted already. Yeah, so it's public transportation is great. You hear all these things that you wouldn't think of otherwise. But anyways, getting to the subject. So Helsinki and biochar. And I'm very happy that Mikko, Tuuli, and Oana are here because they will be able to answer all those questions that I cannot. So anyway, we go on. Okay, but we are in Helsinki, and I think you all know facts about Helsinki, but then the population, this is the capital city, and the Helsinki region, 1.5 million. This is a growing city, which is, I work with climate change adaptation, so the growing city and the densifying city is one of the key, let's say, challenges that we face and this might be also from the point of biochar. But anyway, so the total area, Helsinki is by area a very small municipality in Finland, because nowadays the municipalities in Finland are very large because they've been merged, several smaller municipalities together, but Helsinki is still by area a small one. And that has significance from carbon sinks point of view as well. But anyway, the total area of Helsinki, about 60% is still covered by green infrastructure, green areas and forests and so on. This I skip. But then getting to City of Helsinki climate targets, we have very ambitious targets for climate change mitigation. Our emission reduction targets is first to be carbon neutral by 2030, and then being carbon zero by 2040, and from there on becoming carbon negative. And what we all of these terms, they are sometimes understood differently, but how we understand them in Helsinki is that carbon neutrality means that we have to reduce our emissions by 80%, and the remaining maximum 20% we can compensate. And by 2030 we can compensate this outside of the Helsinki borders. How is this compensation happening? We don't know yet. I don't think anybody knows that exactly. It hasn't been defined. But anyway, so carbon zero, that's by 2040. We mean that the emission reductions as much as we can, and the remaining we have to compensate within the Helsinki city limits. And that will be very challenging because the city limits are, Helsinki is small by area, it's densifying, it's building all the time. So finding those carbon sinks will be a challenge. And this is where, especially this is where I think biochar will have a role, an increasing role. And then carbon negative, this is the most challenging from 2040 onwards. The carbon sinks in the city have to be larger than our emissions. So yeah, ambitious targets. And this is just a picture to show what's going on now with existing measures. We are to reach a target of minus 80% of emissions, and then the remaining gap here, then that we have to compensate outside the city limits. And these emissions are the scope 1 and 2. You know what these scopes mean? Well, the scope 1 is those emissions that are produced within the city limits. And then scope 2 is the energy consumption in the city, and the energy can be produced outside the city limits. Scope 3 is all those emissions that are produced by products and so on, produced outside the city limits, that for what we consume in here, in all of us, the citizens of Helsinki. But usually, so far, only the scope 1 and 2 emissions are calculated and included in this. But this will change, I'm sure, in the future as well. So why is biochar important for Helsinki? First of all, it is one solution to increase cities' carbon sinks, and we really need those solutions. This is a map depicts the carbon storage of the Helsinki metropolitan area. Helsinki is this area here. And the green, the darker green, it is the largest storage. And the story shortly is that most of it, almost all of the carbon sinks in Helsinki are in the forest areas. Very little in other areas, in parks or in the yards and so on. So, but then there's other benefits, as Mikko told, biochar has other benefits also. Adding biochar to soils and substrates improves them, and especially, for example, urban trees, they live in very harsh environments and they need this all the help they can get. And especially Stockholm has had lots of pilots with this, and they, according to those, biochar really helps urban trees to survive and to thrive. Then biochar can be part of circular economy. It gives new ways to treat waste, such as green waste and sludge. And then there's also a possibility that we haven't really considered in Helsinki, but it could be also part of heat production, because as you probably know, most of the heat in Helsinki is produced by combined heat and power. But that is bound to change, I think. So you might need these smaller production units that would feed into the combined heat and power network in the future. So biochar could have a role in that. This is not discussed yet, but yeah, in the future this could change. So what is Helsinki doing? Well, we haven't done so much yet. We have some pilot areas where biochar has been added to soils and substrates, and the most famous of them is Hyväntoivonpuisto in Jätkäsaari, of which Mikko knows a lot more. Yeah. And this year we are having this Helsinki Biochar project. Here's the link to the web page, and there we will add biochar to soils and substrates in several pilot areas. There's going to be perennial planting in Kalasatama next to the Urban Environment Division's new building, office building. There's a sports field in Siltamäki, and then there are tram tracks in the Kalasatama Pasila tracks. There's several parks and grass areas, for example, the grass area around Oodi. And then there's also pilots for urban trees substrate. And then there's been going on testing at the HSY pyrolysis plant for new materials. And these are the type of materials that are produced within the Helsinki area. This is about the circular economy idea that I was talking about, the reef and the green cutting paste, for example, and then also wood chips from the city forest. And Tuuli, was the waste wood as well? No, okay, I could be. Could be, yeah. And then also we have this citizen engagement part in the project. This is just a picture of it that is will be delivered to the citizens and describes them the circle of how biochar could be part of contributing to the city's very ambitious climate targets. So there's plans of distributing biochar to allotment gardens, for example, and so on. But that was all. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll go.
Thank you, Mikko. I'm Susanna, and
Close.
we
So easy.
have a seat in a panel setting. And so now we have a good, good time for discussion, questions and answers. And also I'm going to keep an eye on questions from our online audience. So if you have any questions, please type them here so we can also accommodate them. Well, I'm going to ask the first question because I might have missed a very kind of basic fact about biochar, and I learned a lot about biochar in this session. So is there a lifespan of biochar as a sink? Like for how long biochar can act as a sink? Is it forever or?
Well, firstly, sink is what we call a kind of, sink is the kind of flow of carbon. So we would say that biochar can store carbon for hundreds, not millennia. So it seems to run properly. So these kind of issues. HSY has been now trying first with sludge char, and now last for this winter or this basically spring with other materials.
Okay, well, there are actually two interrelated questions from the online audience that I can potentially squeeze in here. So from Dominique and Lucia, I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly. So the two questions in combination, I think both of them are for Susanna. So one is, what is the, like, at which amount do you estimate by 2030 you need to produce, biochar for contributing to your objectives? And then the other related question is, how do you plan to produce all of the biochar you need?
I don't have the answer for this one.
Okay.
Yes, the latter one is interesting. Because currently we have the problem that we don't have enough producers and we don't have enough demand. And which one comes first? And there's the city, for example, the parks people say that we would use more if it would be easily available and not so expensive. And that would be solved so that then we would have producers that would produce it more. And which comes first and so on. And then for the carbon capture or increasing carbon sinks, that discussion has not started yet. So we don't know what kinds of amounts and what is the city to do and so on. So far, we're just trying to reduce the emissions as much as possible. And the sinks are coming there.
Yeah. So very, very niche then thinking about biochar. So I'm hearing, and there is business opportunity. Okay. So any questions from the, yes, please.
Where is it produced at the moment? Like, someone built a factory to make it, or are you using like?
There would be better people to answer. We will be trialing with biochar that has been produced by HSY at the Amazon. Then we will also work with biochar that's produced by companies, factories in different areas. And so that's also one idea, is to give them opportunities to have their product tested by the city and create the market and give visibility. We have just discussed this, that we have a couple of companies who have said that they are willing to both donate and sell products, and I think city should be really transparent about this, so that we make sure that all the producers who want to participate have this opportunity. And the Jätkäsaari site that Susanna mentioned, that was exactly the same logic, that we said to companies that if you have a good product, please give it to us and we'll try, and the city learns. Well, they said that we are not going to give it to you, but we can sell it at reduced price. So we negotiated that, just trying to make sure that those early entrepreneurs get some revenue and some opportunities, and then the city also learns. So there was like questions of how much dust there's going to be, and do we need to help people not to hang their laundry out in the market. So no one actually knew what's going to happen. Things that still be happening this summer, 2 weeks in charge of everything in terms of the experiments.
Pressure. So one question, it's a bit more logistical question. Will there be any open data on the location of biochar planting in Helsinki city projects, or any blogs and articles that can be followed by interested people?
There's the website address that was there, so the sites are already published there, and we plan to kind of, I guess, maintain a diary or blog. And no one really has the resources to do the kind of scientific follow-up. So that's gonna depend on us finding, money to do the follow-up, but at least the building period will be documented.
We have the Instagram.
Yeah.
There's two publications already, but it's called Helsinki Theory Landscaping.
Any questions from the present audience? Okay, you do, okay, yes. No, you go ahead, yes.
Just in regards to what's being done in the Yakka study, like what kind of what things are you looking at there? So, working on a project that's sort of looking at the walkability, and just curious if there's any sort of overlap.
So there were, was it 5 or 6 different commercial products that were used to plant about 60 trees. So the idea is to repeat it many times enough to have some reliability in test results. Then there were monitors to monitor the soil moisture level, whether it really works so that it keeps moisture level up during dry seasons. And then the tree growth has been measured in, just the diameter of the circle of the tree trunk. So we are monitoring the trees. And there is a recent mushroom species on that.
Could I request a little bit louder conversation, because we brought the microphone as close as possible, but the online audience is complaining that it's not loud enough. So, you had a question, yes, please.
Which one is most favorable for biodiversity, or which one would be first?
No, we haven't. It's very new for us. I've been talking inside the city in our climate unit that this could be a solution. So they're trying to sell biochar. So at least then in Helsinki we are at this level. There must be cities that are more advanced in this, but I don't know them.
Maybe to follow up, one of the issues has been that if biochar is used for filtering, for example, heavy metals, then of course the char accumulates these toxins, and then you have to do something with that. Now, if we put it to the soil to improve field growth, then that's probably the best option, that you get this kind of clean or double benefit out.
So the online audience is interested in how much biochar was needed or used for the mentioned park.
Something like 100 cubic meters for 60 trees. This is now my hunch. The person who really did the planning is not here, so we will not. I'm not looking at anyone particularly.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to call my friend.
Okay, but yeah, ballpark wise, yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Another interesting question. So have you tried producing biochar from industrial sludge, for example, pulp mill sludge, or are there any plans for, exploring that?
I know that there's a company that does lignin-based biochar. Is there anyone in the audience that who knows more about the production technologies? No. Okay, so there, I think that's obviously going to be a place where you can quickly increase the production volumes.
Yeah, right. And then there was this question about how much or what would be the good price for the city to make it accessible for the applications you targeted. Is there any calculations on that or estimate?
The same as substrates cost them now, but I don't know the price. You know, Julie? Well, I mean, it's less than 100 euros per cubic meter. So at least we need to reach that first, and that's the price of some kind of special medium. So maybe that could be the first target when we are now at 300 euros per cubic.
On the other hand, you can think that the carbon sink value of 1 cubic meter of biochar is somewhere between 50 and 100 euros, depending on where the price of the emissions go. So that's going to be like the kind of the minimum value of the product.
Okay, we have online audience present, very interested in quite detailed dimensions of the topic. So has Helsinki looked into using biochar on green roofs for nutrient water retention?
Helsinki hasn't, but I know there's an experiment in Lahti that did that for stormwater and also nutrients, and they also measured that, but Helsinki hasn't so far.
Okay, and then how about using common reed järviruoko to produce biochar? It's very abundant in the lake, so there's quite a lot of ideas coming your way as well. Yes, has there been like considerations on that?
Yes, we have tested that. So
Yeah.
we actually, I was trying to open the reed jar of biochar to produce it here, but I couldn't. But there's one jar. Yes.
And any questions from the in-person audience? Yes, please.
Is there any additional uses that biochar? And also, how are the citizens invited to use it? And what is the invitation then?
But it's very traditional agricultural component, so thousands of years of evidence of people adding burnt wood into the soil. So it's knowledge that it has some functional properties in the soil is there, but that hasn't, to my understanding, hasn't been ever used in Finland, for example. So that's local knowledge. And and then in terms of the social aspect, so one social aspect that I think is quite important, I didn't say so much about this carbon capture and storage, but that's like super technologically advanced process and large scale. Biochar production can happen if there's a local entrepreneur running a small heat network and burning wood chips. We can assume that we can scale down the technology that is relevant to this entrepreneur. So it could be much more relevant for a broader range of small entrepreneurs. Then for this Helsinki trials, there will be at Lapinlahti garden, there will be like citizen workshops, and we will announce them by social media and something else that's been decided. That's going to be in August, most likely. We have one colleague who's doing that particularly, Wilvan, who is not here today, Will is part of this. And he has been very interested in also learning people to make biochar themselves. So they can really make it small scale like
So here is a question from the online audience about the science of biochar. So are you aware of the potential of biochar in resolving the problem of phosphorus cycle on Earth? Scientists have just issued a warning of phosphogeddon concerning chemical nutrients. Biochar and manure excrements can be used to break dependency on chemical fertilizers. Any thoughts or knowledge or information on this?
One of the reasons why HSY started producing sludge biochar was getting phosphorus more from the sludge to get it to the biochar. But then, otherwise, you don't
I actually don't know so much about how. I know that most of our phosphorus that we lose out of the agricultural system is in human urine, but I don't know how biochar would relate to that issue. And our phosphorus capture technologies in Finland are such that phosphorus is not easy to return to the agricultural use, even if we would allow sludge to be used in agriculture. It still doesn't. It's not in a chemical form that does not plants. So I guess there's quite a bit more than what is needed than biochar.
Yeah.
I'm very new to this topic and it's very interesting, but I'm more interested in this more new business model innovation in connection to these new technologies. And what you mentioned about this dilemma of this, you made the comparison of the transitions that, okay, we would use if it's cheap enough, we would produce if it's enough demand dilemma. So is there any work that you are doing or inviting for this more innovative way of looking to these business models and maybe not trying to build this new ways with the old traditional paradigm? And can we invent new value exchange models while trying to bring these things to life?
At least in this case, and I just returned also today from Portugal where we were discussing the same issues. It's clear that the cities want to act as kind of test bed for new technology development. So here, even it's putting a lab in Jätkäsaari Park, it's kind of not convenient for anyone. It's not an easy location and so on and so forth. But making it public, making it known that city is trying to use biochar, inviting companies to have their products tested. So I think that that's some kind of maybe a bit novel way of thinking about innovation processes. And then concerning biochar as such, I think that in Finland there seems to be a lot happening. So it's like every week I hear some new projects. So I think this is kind of beyond the kind of not being known. So I think that we see quite rapid development quite soon.
I have maybe kind of along the same lines question. How does biochar fare against other carbon capture technologies that are being pushed by, big tech? I mean, of course, biochar, in my opinion, would be preferable. And also, of course, we don't need technology development per se. So is there is there competition going on, or how do, policies support biochar over unnecessary, technology push for carbon capture solutions? Do we know anything about that?
I heard that Stockholm is opening, plant is going to open 2026 to run this BECCS, so bioenergy carbon capture and storage. So that's the kind of more advanced or big volume technology. And of course, it has been so that Sweden tends to be maybe often a bit running ahead of Finland also in biochar. Stockholm was leading. So I wonder that they have now gone that way. But in here, for example, Helsinki, Vuosaari new biomass using power plant should be relatively soon having opportunities to produce biochar as well, if the city is serious about this.
Yeah. Any questions from the in-person audience? Also, more questions from online audience?
Yeah, I have a question. I wondered how you interact or collaborate. Sure. Do you have any plans?
Just for the benefit of the online audience, could we also repeat the question before answering that?
Yeah. Yes, with the internet, I can't repeat the question though, with the
Yeah, it was a
international.
bit long question, yes. You say a little bit louder when you're repeating your question, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I'm wondering how you interact and collaborate and approach your potential customers. Do you have any plans?
Oh, yes, the international, you asked about the international cooperation, and with our current partners, well, we collaborate all the time because there's only Mikko and us and Tuuli and then HSY. So, but anyway, with the international cooperation, we are getting support from Bloomberg philanthropies for our current project, which is very good. They have this network of cities for 7 other cities, including us, that are also, all of them are trying different types of pilots with biochar and trying to get it running. So we have these meetings with them, and then we also, Bloomberg organizes sort of peer-to-peer discussions with them. So we have this learning experience. And previously with the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, where we had also a biochar project, there were Stockholm and Helsinki, and then cities from the United States. And there we had lots and lots of discussions of how to do, promote biochar. And that's really the project that I learned most about biochar. Yes, yeah, we were really novice in that project, but then learning all the time. Our learning curve is going up.
Should I say that in this network that the Bloomberg philanthropists are running, it seems that Swedish Helsingborg is the one that is now maybe taking the lead. They have a plan that they will set up a biochar innovation center. So it's like not just building some experiments in the parks, but really putting some money and facilities and structures around this.
They're having the summit.
They will have the Nordic Biochar Summit in June. If you are interested, attend. That would be learning curve.
Nordic Biochar Summit soon.
Helsingborg in June.
Since it's also part of the Creative Sustainability Program, so I was wondering, did you have any kind of desirable future narratives to design and publish how the future would look like if this?
No, not yet. I think we need to kind of both work with the kind of green infrastructures, and what would it look like, and what would the work be like if this would be a kind of mainstream practice. But then I really want to kind of envision a carbon negative district heating system for Helsinki, where actually when we use heat, we know that rather than creating emissions, we are creating negative emissions, and that will have to be built most likely in here, at least partly on biochar. That's the vision. But I also want to credit Will van Tuijer, who is not here, because he's the one, he's Dutch. He came to study in Aalto, and we had this outdoor test site which is for students at campus to try out anything. And Will came to me and said that he wants to start biochar production in there. And I was like, what is biochar? And do you have to make a fire at the campus? And that was probably 6 years ago. So again, it's like ideas travel with international students. So that's how I link creativity, creative sustainability to this event or this collaboration.
Maybe kind of following on or from the futures visions theme. Also like systemic unintended consequences. I'm really curious, Susanna, if you work with the adaptation experts in the city, and are there any, is there any work across kind of, you know, mitigation and adaptation experts so that mitigation innovations such as biochar or other carbon capture is actually not turning into this, you know, maladaptive solutions and hindering adaptation?
Well, we are all of us are working in the same unit, which is 6 people at the present. So yeah, it's so far it's kind of easy to do this. And I work in the adaptations side, and I'm the one that is most excited about biochar so far. But I think I've been able to sell biochar to our mitigation expert as well. Yeah, but so far I think biochar is one of the things that it definitely has synergies with adaptation and mitigation. There are other things that there can be conflicts between mitigation and adaptation. Yes. But I think this is one of those that there won't be conflicts.
Has that been studied in research, or is it a potential kind of research area that can be explored further?
You mean the conflicts in general?
Not in general, but specific to like biochar, you know, the extent that it actually is assisting with both adaptation and mitigation.
It could be, but I you know,
yeah.
I don't know about.
No, but at least it's obvious that it's kind of like a boundary object between the people who manage the green areas of cities that often relate to adaptation and you know, heat island effect and all of that, and then the mitigation. So there it's obvious. I don't think that anyone has made the explicit point that it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Did I just give you a research idea?
At least the next argument to make somewhere.
Okay, so well, we have a new question from the online audience. Are you familiar with the term terra preta and the relation of using biochar for soil regeneration? Soil depletion is one of the silent problems of climate change, and by soil regeneration, the person who asked this question means using manure, effective microorganism, and composting for creating soil.
I hadn't heard of the term, but then the idea and you know the problem is I know of that. Yeah, it is not a problem in Helsinki, but then I think the soils as well, even in Helsinki, they need to be improved, especially in the urban areas, because it's a harsh environment for vegetation and trees and so on. And also, well, you could say that the current building practices, usually the topsoil is destroyed, is taken away, and in place of it, it's something you know, not so valuable, not so good soil is brought. So maybe biochar could have a role in that as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But that is a global problem.
Yeah.
Definitely a biochar could play a much larger role.
Thank you.
Are there any dangers or potential problems with biochar or waste?
I think there might be so one, obviously what I mentioned, this volume of biomass needed. Those who have studied environmental toxicology know that aromatic carbon is not actually what we used to want, or we didn't used to want to have that, because that is a part of several toxic materials. So you have to be able to know and control the process. You don't pollute things. This would relate, for example, using demolition wood that would have plastics in it and so on. But this far, what we know is that it is why process has been working well. We don't have evidence from elsewhere, but also I don't think that the companies have been really trialing with waste materials. They have produced biochar from the most easy feedstock as wood chips. So surprises ahead, I'm quite sure.
There's also a risk if the biochar you use for the substrate is not proper or good for the plant you're planting, because biochars are different. So you have to choose the biochar correctly. And that is one of the things that are maybe is one of the concerns that our park and people are facing. They want to be sure that once they build have a tree, and because urban trees are very, very, very expensive, so you don't want the tree to die because of the not so good substrate. But anyway, those are problems that can be solved.
Okay, well, it looks like we've reached a natural end, which is lovely, and also because it is timely. So I would like to, first of all, thank Mikko and Susanna for joining NODUS Talks 6th year anniversary edition. Daniel Uusitalo for producing the series, and both online audience and also everyone who came today on a bright sunny day. It's always a big choice to make to come indoors. So thank you so